Okay, so hello everyone online. As you can see, we're doing another hybrid one, so please be patient and gracious with us as we work through technical issues. Please let us know, for you guys online, please let us know if you can't hear us or if you have a question. We'll have the presenter, the person, make sure that they read out the question and repeat the question so that everyone everywhere can hear it. All that kind of stuff. Please keep yourself on mute for you guys online, just so we don't have any background noise or anything like that. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, today's agenda, again, just welcome to everyone. We'll do a get to know a member / costume contest explanation. So for example, if you guys can see mine, I'm a Tableau prep flow, like flow from Progressive. So it's my little pun for the day. And then if anyone else wants to explain theirs or share theirs, if you guys are online, feel free to raise your hand, let us know. And then we're going to talk about some interactive buttons. And also Kristoffer is going to talk about the Tableau group blueprint. And then we'll do best thing I learned, or if you guys have any problems with Tableau, we can do like a working session or that kind of stuff. Group therapy. There we go. That's what it's called. So first thing is mark your calendars. So tomorrow is DataViz Coffee and Donuts, and this is a really cool meetup that has basically no agenda. The agenda is to just connect with other data analytics people. It is in person. You also get to eat donuts. So how terrible could that be? But it is tomorrow morning, 7:30 and 9:30 at Glam Doll Donuts, and you can register at Meetup or find more information there. Next week is all of the meetings and all the meetups. So we've got the Twin Cities Data Engineering Meetup. This is going to be nice. They said more people walk in with a costume. Very great. The Twin Cities Data Engineering Meetup, this is going to be about Snowflake. And so that's more before Tableau-y kind of stuff. Next one is the Power BI Meetup. Again, if you do anything data analytics or just want to connect with people who are also using that platform. Then on the 4th, we've got Women in Big Data. This one is geared towards women who are in big data. And this one specifically is about a healthcare related item. And this one is kind of like a lunch hour one. So that one is online. Next is the Data Freelancers Unite. Do you want to talk about this real quick, or I can put you on the spot?
It's another group I started.
You want to come up and talk about it? Serena, the serial group starter.
Yeah, I have a problem. So yeah, I did. Hi guys, Serena. I did start another group. It's Data Freelancers Unite, and the whole premise there is, as like independent contractors, you guys are, those of you that do that, kind of all floating around out there. Can you feel kind of lonely, like you're just, out there off doing your own thing? So that's the purpose of that, is to get them together, find out ways to support each other and collaborate, that kind of thing. So check it out if that applies to you. Thank you, Katrina.
Sweet. And then the next week after that is going to be the Tableau Conference. And we talked about this last week a little bit. Oops, there we go. Move the slide. So if you don't know anything about it, the Tableau Conference is 100% free, 100% virtual. There's going to be a lot of demos, deep dives. There's brain dates where you can like meet with a small group of people and just kind of like chat about something or anything. There is going to be a Slack channel this year, which is now open for joining. So not quite sure what is going to entail with all of that, but it should be fun. You can just, if anything, you can send gifts back and forth to each other, which is always fun. And then the last one, one of the main things is the Ironviz contest, which is like competitive dashboarding. And we are going to try something new this time and have a conference watch party. So Sam's going to come up and talk about that event. King Sam, Bishop Sam, I don't know. What are you?
We're still working it out.
Okay.
Hey everybody, my name is Sam Epley. I work at Data Drive, and this year for Ironviz, what we're going to do is we've reserved a movie theater in New Hope. It's a 150-seat movie theater, and since Tableau Conference is 100% virtual, we figured why not make it not only Ironviz, but incorporate the entire day. So between 11 and 5 Central Time, when Tableau Conference is going on, we're going to have a movie theater reserved. They've got, I'm pretty sure they have like table service. So you'll be able to order food. We're figuring out the finer details of how to get everyone, at least one entree and a drink or something. But it'll be a fantastic opportunity for us to all get together, jam pack a movie theater and watch Ironviz on a big screen.
Is Data Drive sponsoring them?
Yes, Data Drive is sponsored.
It's not like a lab.
This is Data Drive sponsored. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So that should be fun. Do something different. Try that. Okay. And then does anyone have any other like announcements or things that are coming up in the community? Anyone online? Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Nope. Okay, that's good. That means I got them all. But feel free to, post in the LinkedIn group if there is something that comes up or anything like that. Next, we're going to do get to know a costume member. So if you guys, especially you guys online, please raise your hand if you have a costume and want to show it to us. And then for a couple of you guys who have costumes, will you guys please come up and tell us about your costume if it requires explanation or something?
Actually, start with a couple people online.
Let's see, is there?
Let's just have.
Doesn't look like anyone's raising their hands. And give it another second. It should pop up to the top, right?
Yeah,
I think.
you should.
Yeah.
You get a lot.
Friends.
Well, how about we have Mr.
Mr. Shipping Container.
Yeah.
There are a few doors he couldn't get through. Made it to bring you your goods.
Very nice.
What?
So you want to tell us your name, tell us your costume, and then a little bit about your Tableau experience. Well, see, can you take a step back a little bit? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Okay, so I am Stephen Schatzer. I work for Regional Financial Corporation, it's a regional bank headquartered in Alabama. I work as a data visualization designer, so I specialize in Tableau. And the type of data, right now I'm working heavily with contact center data, so it's a lot in that field, and then just a couple other fields as well. I've been using Tableau for about 3 years now. Good at in Tableau, getting to know new features. The features or functions I struggle with. LOGs, I guess, from time to time. But, yeah, excited to be here. Just Twin Cities and helps.
And you said?
Yes.
Yes, it is your first time coming.
Yes.
All right. Sam, you already came up. Do you want to?
I have my skeleton costume on.
Yay.
It's a Dia de los Muertos costume, so I have a candy skull mask. But it's fragile, so I don't wear it.
Is it like a full body suit?
No, it just comes over or whatever. It's not.
But that's a one piece. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, hello, Trisha. A lot of you know me. Let's see. I work for Salesforce Tableau. I'm on my 90 days there. So yay. I am a lead solution engineer for them, so kind of pre-sales role. And I work with all kinds of data, but I specialize at Salesforce in manufacturing, engineering, and construction. All that's good stuff. I've been using Tableau for like 8 years. What am I good at in Tableau? Probably visualizing data-driven decisions within Tableau, and I'm getting really good at map features now. What do I struggle at with Tableau? A lot of things like, get a lot of questions later on my answers to that. About server stuff is still working on that. And then, yeah, everyone go to the Tableau Conference. I'll be a doctor there, so
Ooh,
I'll try to.
very exciting. Thank you.
I get why.
Yes,
It is too bad.
yes.
Next year. Probably.
Hey, you wanna come up?
I do. I'm sorry, I can barely see in this. My name is Julie.
You wanna come a little bit closer, just so we can hear you with the mask, just in case?
Okay, can you read the questions?
Yeah. What's your
Um,
name? And what company do you work for?
I work for the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis. I analyze like all sorts of engagement data, survey analysis, financial information. I'm pretty good at, I've been using it for about 4 years. I love capacity for dashboards and for, just for general visualization. I'm pretty good at design, pretty good at maps. I'd like to learn more about parameters and server interactive usage across the organization. And then the
Yeah.
costume, I go ape for data. Well, if you see the t-shirt, we have a nice little pie chart on there. I've charted out my bananas and to my coconut intake. And then of course I drink the Tableau Kool-Aid. It says drink it, it calms the mind and it eases migraines. So go Tableau.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. All right, well, if anyone has joined that does have a costume, please raise your hand real quick. And we'll see if don't see anyone. So on that note, James, if you want to come up and we'll get started with our presentations. To Brad, your question about how does the barge sit down? He doesn't, he took it off. There's a step. And Jeff says, I bet his favorite chart type is the barge chart. So, hey. Yes, okay.
Okay.
Sweet.
Stuff. Get out of the way, Zoom. All right. So here's my fancy slide with, yeah. So I'm James. I'm a analytics consultant with Tessellation. I work with Katrina. I do most of my work with Tableau. I work with a lot of stuff. Tableau is the most fun. Here, I'll just screen so you can actually see me. There we go. That way I'm in frame and you're not just looking at like this. Okay, so yeah, in any case, I'll just jump right into it. I've got a lot I can cover. I probably won't be able to get through all of this. But yeah, so we're going to talk about buttons. Buttons in Tableau and how you can create some interesting ones that do a lot of very useful things that you'll come back to. I've set this up as kind of a template where you can build it. You don't have to do it exactly this way, but I'll explain some of the reasons why I made certain decisions. You can certainly make different ones. There's advantages and disadvantages to certain techniques. I for sure want to get through these over here. So the toggle buttons, multi-select buttons, multi-select with all is very interesting. And we probably won't have time for this, but this is interesting too. So I'll see if I can speed through. And of course, I'm here. Anyone has questions about any part of this, but like this to me is like what Tableau is kind of really excels at compared to other things, is just interactivity. A lot of customizable ways to bring data to life, interactable, and so we'll jump right in. So this pairs together a lot of different concepts, a lot of different functionality within Tableau. They're built on parameter actions. I'll show you an implementation of a multiple selection parameter, which can be very useful. We'll talk about data modeling a little bit. There's a trick for mark deselection, which is really helpful for things like buttons, where you click a mark and you don't want that mark to say selected. Map layers are actually a really interesting thing that interacts with this, because you can control what user can interact with. That's a new thing with map layers. And if we get to the scroll buttons, which we probably won't, then there's some nested table calc. Like I'll be showing a lot of calculations. I actually wrote a blog where all of this is written out, so you don't have to be like, oh, quick, let me write this down somehow. It's all there. I can get links to anyone who wants it. But I've got a blog. I also have a version of this on Tableau that you just download, take a look at it, deconstruct it, all of that good stuff. So I'm actually going to flip over to this right here. So here's kind of my example cookbook that we have for parameter buttons. So these are the things that I'll show you how to do. So we've got a single toggle. You just click it and it's an on-off sort of thing. And all of these tie into parameters. The reason for that is you can build this agnostic of any other data source, and then you can patch this in to any data source. This works independently, and you can bring it in because it has its own data connection, which is literally just a CSV file with a few lines on it. And you can build it however you want to work with your existing data source, with whatever dimensions you have that you want to make work. And this will just work nicely. It's kind of a template. So hopefully it's useful in that respect. This is just a simple on-off. This one's more interesting because we've got multiple selection. This sort of thing is good when you have a fixed number of items in a dimension. So if you have something that's like 3 to 5 to whatever, you could do it with that, but that you have to consider that in your design. And this is generally going to be best suited for things that are hard to fit. So if you have a fixed like 4 different values that you want the user to select, this will work nicely for that. Though you could certainly make it too. This is multiple select. So here's where we get into, as you can see, the parameter stores multiple values. And as I click and select and deselect things, that changes. So it's effectively a delimited list that I'm creating and updating. It allows me to use a single parameter string to reflect multiple selections at a time. And then this last one is the fun one. It's multiple select, but with the twist, we have an all button. So if I click all, it's going to select all. And when all are selected, if I click it again, it deselects everything. This is really interesting. I won't get into it right now, but there's some quirks to this. I had a few different ways to make this work, and I think I found a really nice one. So let's start with single toggle. So this is ultimately what we're going to build. It looks a lot bigger this way. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a copy of this, and we're going to clear it out, and we're going to make it together. So we're going to start from nothing here. I have my calculations pre-made here, but what I'm going to do is make this and show you how it's made. I'm not going to go through like creating the calculations all from scratch. We don't have that much time, but I'll show you how it works, why it works. And again, you can dig up the example workbook, and there's a blog that walks you step by step too. So what this is using is we're going to use map layers to create several layers for this button. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm going to collapse all of the ones I don't want to look at right now. I've got everything split up into folders, which is, I'd say, a best practice. This is how I like to do it, at least. So Single toggle is what we're going to do right now. So I'm just going to drag, this is a calculated field right here. This is my button map path, and I have, this is using the make point function, which is a geographic function. And I have two calculations, button path Y and button path X. I'll show you what it does, and then I'll show you how it does what it does. So I'm going to drag this onto detail, first of all, and now we get a nice map. We're not interested in making a map, but we are using map layers. We'll disable the actual geographic map in a little bit, but we'll leave it up for now for reasons I'll get to in a second. So button path X is this. So this is where I'm going to talk about data sorts for a second. What this is doing is taking, actually, I'm going to talk about data sorts. So data modeling is used in here using one, this all uses one file that has like 25 rows in it. It's just 1 through whatever. And switching back to this is what it looks like. So you've got layers.csv. You can have as many as you want, but it's just a simple data scat is really what it is. And I'm joining it to itself. I'm creating an intentional Cartesian join. I'm joining every row in one to every row in the other using a relationship. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use these 1 through 13 to create the shape of our button, which is the blue line going around here. And I'll show you how this is working. And then as we get into the other examples, the first one only has one button, but the other examples all have multiple buttons. So our second joined file so second set of layers is going to be the number of buttons. So you can have any number. You just need to make sure that you have enough rows in your data model, data source in order to pull it off. Probably wouldn't want more than 25 buttons. That might be excessive. You might want to filter something different from that. But so anyway, this is how the data modeling works. I will show you in here. So this is layers.csv. It's just 1 through 25. I'm not even using all of those. I'm using 13 of them. And in here, in the relationship, we've defined it as 1 equals 1. So what that actually means is I went into the calculation, the relationship calculation, just put in 1. And I did that on both sides. So it's joining every row to every row, because that is always true. So let's go back to our single toggle here. So I have button path X. So this is along the x-axis of our map that we're creating for the button. And this is just a series of values from 1 to 15. And then we have button path Y, which is the same thing, but it's vertical. So up and down. And we're drawing it. We're literally drawing a circle with rounded is what this is. So I have, you can kind of see, but there's dots on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag layer A into, whoops, actually first I want to make this a polygon. And then I'm going to drag layer A to path. And now we have something that looks a little bit like a button. It's kind of big. I'm actually going to show, I can't do that yet. So button path X and Y are here. That's just kind of the basic shape of our button that we're creating. You can make whatever you want. You can make it any shape. And you would just set up whatever values you would want to create that. So there's some other calculations in here. We need a parameter that we're going to store the button status. So I just have what is single toggle value. And that is just, it can be anything. In this case, it's active and inactive. It's just a string. And I don't have it limited to a list, because what we're going to do is we have a calculation for button label, which is just showing what the value actually is. And then we have whether it is active. So is the value active or not? So it's true or false. And then we have the action. So this just checks to see if that value is active. Then we're going to set it to inactive, or else it'll be active. So pretty simple logic on this one. So we have the shape of the button. I'm going to set this to 50% opacity because I like to do that. So this is our first layer. Now we're going to make another layer. We're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to grab this collection here, this make point, and I'm going to add a new marks layer. Then we have more points up here. This layer I'm going to make is a line. The same thing. You're going to drag layer A onto path. Now we've got a nice blue outline around our button to be. And this one I want to set to disable selection because I only want the user to be able to click on and interact with the polygon, not anything else. That's one of the advantages of using map layers is you can control that sort of thing. So we have that set on here, and then I'm going to go up here. So I have another calculation for the center of the button, which is what I'm going to use to anchor my text. And this is just 4, which is halfway up and down, and then 7.5 halfway up. So it's just the center as a fixed point. And I'm going to make that into my third and final layer. And I'm going to disable selection on that. That is going to be text. And then I'm going to put the label as the text. And it says active. I could make it a little bit bigger if I wanted to, say 12. And now I can go into map, change from background maps, light to none. And there we go. And if I want, I can show the headers on these. I can change the size. And then as I decrease the size, like you can see the kind of the jagged edges when it's bigger, but you can't when it's smaller. I also probably want to fix the range on this to just a 0 to 15. Oops, actually in this case, I don't. Yeah, not for just a single one. So there's that. So now I've got this. I also want to disable tooltips. You could leave them on if you wanted to do something with that, but I'm going to leave them off. So we have our button. Now we need to make it do something. I'm going to show the parameter for the single toggle value. And now we're going to create some actions. Now, normally I do this on the dashboard. I'm just going to do it right here on the sheet. There is, so the first one is, yeah.
The show parameters behind the.
Oh, on the screen. Yep,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna just minimize this here. Thanks for letting me know. There we go. Just hidden over there. Suppose I can put it over here. Okay, so we're gonna do that. I'm also gonna add, let's see, button label to this. This is what I'm gonna use to drive, or I'm sorry, I'm gonna put action on to the polygon because that's what we're gonna click on. And I'm gonna go into worksheet actions. Do this at the dashboard level. And I've got a lot of other stuff in the workbook, so we're just going to look at this sheet. So I'm going to add my parameter action, change parameter, and it's going to look at single toggle, select parameter is single toggle value, and my source field is the button action, and that's it. So now we're almost there. This will work, but there's one extra little touch we'll add to it. So I click on that, it changes it to inactive. Actually, sorry, 2 more touches. So I also want to change the color. So I'm gonna drag button active onto color for both polygon and the line. And there we go. So now inactive is gray, active is blue. And right now I'm also having to click off each time because if you notice I click on it and I can't see what's there. So how do we solve that problem? Well, that's where this little trick comes into play. I'm going to, on the polygon layer, add these 2 calculated fields, true and false, detail. All these are is just a literal value false and a literal value of true. And what I can do is add 2 more actions that will, in conjunction with each other, automatically deselect itself after it's been selected. So the first one is highlight. If you're doing this from a dashboard, it has to be from the dashboard level to the sheet itself. In this case, I'm just doing it at the worksheet level, so it works fine. But run action on select, right? And for selected fields, I want to select just true. So this is one half of the story. The other half of the story is a filter action. So I also am going to select just my single toggle 2 sheet here. The target sheet is the same. It's going to be on select. And clearing the selection will show all values. And we're going to use selected fields, and this is where the fun is. So I'm going to just filter on true, where true is equal to false. So this is kind of a little tricky trick, but if it works, if I did it right, now it will deselect itself when I click it. And there's no weird mouse over stuff that happens. So like it looks like a button, it functions like a button. And as you can see, the parameter value is changing and driving everything. So this is the basic structure of how all of these buttons work and how they're built. So we're using map layers to create 3 different levels. You got the polygon, the line, and the text. You can do whatever you want. That's not a hard, fast rule. There's a lot of room for different designs here. And then you've got a calculation to show what's going to be the label. You've got a calculation to show what's going to be the action when I click on it, like what's the new parameter value that I should go to once I click on it based on whatever logic. So in this case, it's just looking at what's the current value of the parameter. If so, change it to the other one. Vice versa. So that's the simplest form of this. I'm not going to go through step by step on all of these. It would take too long, but I'm going to show you how they differ and things that we're adding for each other iterations. So yeah, the null. That's just due to the relationship. That's yes, yeah. So if you publish them to server, they won't show. Otherwise, you can go to analysis, special values, hide, and then they're gone. Yeah, that works too. So, yeah, like any good application, there's like 5 ways to do the same thing. Yeah, one thing I didn't do, which I'm not going to spend lots of time doing, is formatting. You can see there's some faint grid lines in the background. You can go through here and clear all that stuff out. The one that always gets me is I think I clear out all the grid lines and this column grid line next to it's sticky. So yeah, if you just clear out all of those, then you'll get a nice clean one, and then you'll end up with this. I'll just show you what changes for each of these iterations. So we did single toggle, we built that up. For multiple toggle, if I can talk today, the difference here is we're going to add in the second layer. So layer A forms the shape of the button going around. Layer B, which is that second set, this is pulling from that second data source that joined in to itself, is the number of buttons going across the top. So if I show this here, show header, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I've got my button labels at the top, so button A, B, C, D. In this case, I'm defining the button labels across layer B. So I'm using just a simple case statement to hard code it in this case. And so you can do these dynamically, as I mentioned before. The benefit of hard coding is if you have a small number of finite options where a button would work really well. And then you can build this independent of the other data source. And because it's such a small one, it's very lightweight, it's really fast. It's not going to bog anything. I'm not going to get myself up a table. But in any case, so we've got layer B is being used as our scaffolding going across from side to side. And we're naming the buttons based on that. I've filtered out anything that's null on those. Actually not shown there, but yeah, I've excluded any nulls from that I haven't defined with button names. And in this case, so my button active is this. So it's just checking to see if the multi-toggle value equals the label. And if so, it's true. If false, it's not. And then I'm just making the action on this one. It's tied to the button label value. So I don't have a separate action calculation for this because I don't really need it. I can just use button labels for that. But that's how that works. Another thing you might notice is these look a little bit different. They're connected in the middle. And what I did for that is I have different variations on the path for the polygon depending on its position. So they all kind of connect together. You don't have rounded corners on the middle buttons. So I have a middle connect which is just zeros and 15s. It's just a rectangle. There's no rounded corners in the middle ones. And on the ends, so I've got a left round end, and you see there's a lot more 15s in the middle there. And that's, this one is the left side, this one is the right side. And then, so the button path has an extra step in it. Don't worry about unpacking this calculation, it's on the blog, or you can ask me. And so this is just a calculation that checks to see where it is, like which one should I use? And so it figures all that out, and it uses the appropriate shape, and it lets me string a bunch of buttons together. And I could use this for any number of buttons, 15, and would use the appropriate ones for the ends of the middle. So that's how that one works. We'll keep going here. What happened to my, it's because I did that. Now it's, yeah.
How did you figure out the numbers? 15 versus 12.
Do you mean just the number of points in the polygon? That's just kind of aesthetic. I just figured out, okay, here's how many points I want in the rounded curve, and just made that work, and ended up being 13 because I've got an ending that connects with the beginning, so there's not a gap. But yeah, you could use any number of them. You could use lots of them to get that curve looking just super great at a big scale. So that's fine. I wanted it to be kind of efficient, so I wanted just enough to make it look good when the button is small size I want it to be. But yeah, you could certainly use more. So multi-select, this is where it gets interesting, because we are pushing a bunch of values at once into a single parameter, and we're using a delimited list here. So how does that work? Well, the structure is the same as our multiple toggle, but with multi-select, I'll show you what we've got. So the difference here is the action. Multi-select, all of my stuff is in this folder here. I'm going to close this up because there's nothing new there. So we've got our labels. So button ABCD, that's all the same. Our button path, this is the same one as before. I just have a different calculation, so it's all there. Our active. So this looks in our delimited list. I use vertical pipes for delimiters because you're rarely going to encounter those in the wild. Less so than a comma. In this case, you're hard coding the values. So like, unless you put a comma into the name or the label of something, you're not going to run into trouble. You just pick one. I like vertical pipes, so I do that. But in this case, I'm doing a contains function to see, is that value somewhere in there? And I put that vertical pipe at the end just to make sure. If you wanted to be super sure if like one is a subset of another, you could have pipes on either end. So you could get really safe about that. So
That's very smart, because I had a customer that had commas in the field, and I was like, how do I, there's nothing I can do.
Yep. Use something other than a comma. So, and then so this is the magic here. This is our multi-select action. So we're looking to see, is it in there? And if so, we're going to replace, we're going to replace the value that's been selected plus that pipe at the end with a zero length string. So we're just going to do a replace function to take it out of there. Or else we're just going to add it onto the end. We're going to concatenate it to the end of the list. And it generally works pretty well. So that's the main difference between those. Like, see, it works as you would expect. I can click and it'll select and deselect all day long. Now the big one. This one, I thought, oh, I might as well add this. And I didn't quite know how I was going to do it yet. And I went through probably about 3 different ways of doing it before I settled on this. This works about the same as the last one, but the calculations are a lot more complex because we've got a lot of logic going on. So multi-select with all, for the labels, we're doing the same thing, except we've added in all, but at the end. You can put it at the beginning, wherever you want, it doesn't matter. For active, it's doing, well, I'm not going to get there yet. So action, this is where all the action happens. Look at all that good stuff. Fortunately, you don't have to read all of that. I kind of summarized it in this slide. Oh, this is all the stuff I was just talking about. So this is, yeah, the multi-selection parameter. So this is kind of the logic, and I'll explain. Actually, it's easier for me to show, I think. So if I click all, you notice there's a different value that pops up in the parameter. It has an all value. So if I deselect it, it's empty. If I select it, it's all. If nothing is selected and I select button A, then I get the usual behavior of just adding to the delimited list. But when I select B, notice what happens. Switches back to all. Why is that important? I need this to know whether all of them are selected or not, because watch what happens if I deselect A. All stays, but now it's showing which ones I have deselected rather than just the full list of what I have. So there's two modes for this. There is that fixed all value at the beginning of the parameter, which tells me which mode I'm in. So am I selecting items from a fully deselected list, or am I deselecting items from a fully selected? Because like, how would you do that otherwise? Like if you're just doing it, showing a list of all the items that were selected, I could make it work by just saying, well, if you click all, add the full string of all of the delimited values, which I could do that. But if you have to change them, then you have to change all of those calculations too. So basically this separates it into two modes. I'm adding values into that parameter from a base of nothing, or I have everything selected and now I'm going to deselect that. So I've deselected button A, now I've deselected button B, and then C, and then you'll notice if I click D, it just all blanks out. So it goes back to kind of default state. So what I have to do is I have to detect if I'm about to deselect the last in a elimination mode. If it's the last button and I'm unclicking it, then it clears it out. Or if I'm adding them and I'm about to click the last one, then it goes into the all mode. So I have to detect all of those states in order for it to just function the way you'd expect. So something like that series of buttons with an all button, like there's a lot more logic to it than I thought before I went into building it. And I'm like, oh, just, there's just kind of an innate expectation. And it turns out when you have to write that out, it looks something like this. It's more complicated than you would just expect it to intuitively work. But that's kind of how it works. Good news is you don't have to do all that because I did it for you. You can just grab it from my example. So that is how it works. So how would you implement that in a worksheet is kind of the next question. Like, how do I actually use this? What you would do is I have some example evaluation calcs. So if I've got that multi-select parameter, what I'm doing is I'm just doing a contains function in my real worksheet that has my actual data in it. That's separate from this data source, and it's going to look at the value which transcends data sources. That parameter of value is available to me regardless of the data source of the worksheet, as long as it's in the same workbook. And then I'm going to compare it against my dimension from whatever else I'm actually building the viz on top of. The one for multi-selection with all looks a little bit different, but it's not too bad on this side. This one's not quite as scary. So it just has two modes. It's just looking to see is all there. And then if, it's just has two different sets of criteria, depending on if I'm excluding based on what is in that list, or if I'm including based on what is in that list. So I will take a deep breath. I just said a lot. Any questions?
Question. So you mentioned that you're trying to detect with multi-selected all when you're doing additive, and then trying to sync that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question about if you have all selected, and then how you're pulling them out.
It is.
How it had all at the left. I'm curious because as you sort of stack them, then it started to pull them out, or added them back on. If you had all selected and then unselect two and then select one of the ones that is unselected, does it go into additive mode, or does it treat it as if it's still?
It doesn't switch modes until it completely fills up or completely empty. So I'll show you what that looks like. So if I deselect D, then C, then B, and then I reselect D, it just removes D from the list. So it stays in that same mode. It does kind of, I put back to this. And my intent is not to scare you with a big scary equation, but is to explain, like, yeah, you can do this in Tableau and make it simple for the user who's not seeing all of it. And like, I literally had to go into just document and just write out in English, what do I want this to do in different situations? What are all the cases that have to be met that I have to account for to make this work? There are other ways that I thought of to do this, which is having two parameters. One to show which mode it's in. Is it an additive mode or a subtractive mode? And then the other to store the list of items. And I'm like, okay, that'll work. And then I realized, oh, I can just do it all with one parameter by having that all prefixed at the beginning or not. I just have to make sure that one of the other button names isn't. But if you had that, you'd have problems with ambiguity. But yeah, without going through line by line in this, which probably isn't the best use of time. That's how it handles it. Yeah. Again, if you go into this, you've got questions on like how to implement this and what you're going through. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help and chat through it with you.
Do you have a customer that was like, I need buttons, not drop down for it?
Yes, I did. So like
you can vote too for having Tableau creating buttons that allow parameters in them as like an object and dashboard. And
yeah, this is like a direct result of a use case with a client who wanted something very, very specific. They wanted to look in a very specific way and function, and they wanted Tableau to not look like Tableau. So I ended up building like custom drop downs and things like that were, it didn't look like Tableau once we were done with it, which is kind of fun.
Is it an embedded dashboard? Or is it like on a web page or an iframe?
Yeah, on server. Yeah, just out of
On server.
Yeah. Yeah, I need the very mobile version of it.
Yeah.
I want to do it for my watch. It'd be interesting. Let's see. I won't go like super in depth, but I'll just show you a few. It looks like I've got a couple minutes left. Maybe I'll show you a couple other examples. I put together this slider toggle, which looks like this. It actually was animated appropriately in a previous version of Tableau, and now it just kind of blinks on and off. I'll have to figure out what that happens. But like, there's different ways that you can do this to have different styled buttons. The other thing I was going to show was this, which is looping scroll buttons. I won't go into the why in depth in the step-by-step build on this one. But this was an interesting use case I came across building a Tableau public viz that I just put up, which is this one right here. So just got back from hiking trip in Minnesota North Shore. Went with the family. I did one trip in September without the kids, with just my wife. We were able to go on more aggressive hikes for longer. And then another trip with the kids for 3 and 5 who maybe can't handle the all day sort of hike. And I thought, oh, I got all this GPS data. Let me visit out. I got pictures. How can I integrate this together? So I wanted the user to be able to select a hike, and I wanted them to be able to scroll through pictures. I wanted it to just scroll through endless. So when you get to the end of the list, go back to the beginning. And so I got it to work, but in the end, it's something like this. So you've got a category selection where you can switch between categories. And when I do that, it selects the first item within the subcategory. This is just using super. So I can scroll back and forth at a high level, and within the category, I can also scroll. And when I get to the end of the list, there we go. It scrolls back to the top, where I can scroll backwards from the start to the end. And it works at either level. So that's effectively what this dashboard is doing at the hike level and at the photograph within the hike. I wanted just nice scrolling where it would work as the user expected. I'll just show you real quick how that works. I had my sheets here. So here's my list. I've just got category, subcategory, and then I've got it colored by is the subcategory selected within my parameters. So I've just got 2 parameters for category and subcategory. Subcategory is a little easier. I'm just going to unhide all this stuff. Show all of this here. Show hidden data. So we've got a list. Here's our categories, and here's our subcategory. And I've got true, false if the subcategory is selected, which is here's my true. And then I have a set of arrows for each of them. I'm using my layers data source joined in to the regular Superstore data source in this case, just to get 2 buttons within the same worksheet. You could do this with two worksheets, one for a back button and one for a forward button without having to do that. But I like to do things in a single sheet if I can. You know, it sometimes makes more or less sense to do that. But there are different actions. So I've got, if I go here, so I can pull up next. Here's kind of the guts of how it works. There's a table calculation that looks to see, is it the last one in the list based on my table calculation? If so, look up the first item in the list. Otherwise, look up the next item in the list. And then I've got a similar one for previous. Oops. And this is the same thing. If it's the first item in the list and I'm going backwards for previous, then look up the last item in the list. Otherwise, look at the previous one using a lookup function. So that's how that's working. And since I have it in the same row, I have another one to just look at the layers. Is it layer 1? Then use the previous calculation. If it's layer 2, use the next calculation. And then looking in that, I can add that in, and then I have to look at the table calculation. This is where nested stuff comes into play. I have to set both of these. Real quick, I realized I would often forget I'd set one and forget to set the other, and like, it works one way, why doesn't it work the other way? It's because you've got nested table calculations in here. So I set the level at which I want it to count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the next one starts over at 1 for the new category. And then that's what allows it to work. Of course, it's going to look weird if I go back here. Yeah, it's not going to show up. The category selection works the same way, but at the category level with the added functionality where if I switch categories, I need to switch subcategories to the first subcategory for that category also. So it actually requires doing that twice at the category and the subcategory level. So I'm right at the bottom of the hour. Time. So yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. That is sometimes difficult clients can unlock interesting things. But yes. I definitely agree that multi-select parameters are one of my favorite features. I think it for me, it took my dashboards like just to a whole new level with interactivity and cool things you can do. So if you haven't already, definitely encourage you to dive into those and try and figure those out. And again, if you guys run into any issues, feel free to put it on our LinkedIn group or contact James or me or any of the other leaders. We can definitely help you with that. But with that, we've got Kristoffer up next talking about the Tableau blueprint. So come on over. Do you have
I am gonna plug in the power just.
okay.
Sure that
Okay.
that doesn't.
Yes. Can you reach or do you need to move? Okay.
There we go.
Okay. And then
And I just need to press share. Sounds
Yep.
good. All right. Thank you. Oh, how's that looking? Yeah, Hello. Hi, I'm Kristoffer Olson. I am going to talk about Tableau Blueprint. So if you really, really liked the nitty gritty details of those calculations, you're gonna be really disappointed in this, which is the exact opposite end of the spectrum. I actually think it's a perfect combo. So thank you, James. That was super cool. I'm gonna use some of those tricks. Super neat. Tableau Blueprint, first of all, who here before, maybe you looked at the agenda, but like before that, has heard of Tableau Blueprint? Okay, about half the room internally, and I didn't see everyone online, but a lot of people don't know what it is. So I wanted to make sure that people understood what Tableau Blueprint is, what you need to know about it as a data leader, as a Tableau developer, as just somebody who's interacting with other people in your organization who are using these reports. It's generally just a way to go beyond Tableau itself and make sure that you're implementing Tableau right from an organizational, technical, et cetera perspective. So we'll get into, look, I've got a whole bullet point about what Tableau Blueprint is, which I already kind of answered for you, but basically, before I go any further, I'm Kristoffer Olson. I work at Data Drive. At Data Drive, we're a full stack analytics consulting company. We specialize in human-centered data. So really, what your end users need is the beginning of the requirements. And so, of course, Blueprint fits right within our wheelhouse in a lot of this stuff in terms of like what it means for your organization. You can build the best dashboard in the world, but if people aren't using it or if they can't access it on the server, your server doesn't have the right resources. There's so many more things that go into really becoming a data-driven organization that I really geek out about. So we'll talk about what it is. There's a process to it that Tableau really lays out. We'll talk about analytics strategy and what you need to know kind of up front before you really dive into it all. The executives and team you need to make sure that your Tableau implementation is successful and generally your data-driven culture is successful. And then talk through some of the core capabilities that Tableau lays out that are useful for data-driven organizations. And then I've got my own additional thoughts at the end. Oh, also, I say I'm a data wizard. I'm also an actual wizard, and that means that I was a full-time professional magician for 5 years after I graduated college. That's that reference. There we go. I have since gotten an MBA from the University of St. Thomas. I've been working in analytics since 2012, and I've been using Tableau ever since then as well. So been working with it a long time. What is Tableau Blueprint? It's a framework. It's a process, it's an assessment, but I think framework is the best way to describe it as an all-encompassing type of a thing. This picture, this is straight out of from Tableau. This is the picture that they use to discuss Tableau Blueprint. I love that it looks like a Tableau prep and a workflow, of course. So it's a great visual. And I think just visually, when you look at it, you see, okay, yeah, there's way more than just like building a particular dashboard. Oftentimes an organization that starts adopting Tableau, it ends up starting because they have a particular use case. They have a particular report that they want automated. They have a particular set of data that they want to make easier to work with. They have particular decisions that they want to make. And it is really, having been involved in several just early, like bringing Tableau into a company from the get-go, it can be really tempting to just say, well, let's go. Because as you all know, it is, there's a easy learning curve up front where you can just like, I made this, it's now useful, this is awesome. And I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying don't do that without thinking about the big picture. So this framework, you start with an assessment. That is the core part of what Tableau Blueprint is. It's an assessment that comes in a little Excel sheet, and it's got all sorts of like details, way more details than we're going to go into today. Detail broken out by category. There's like a tab for each one of these workflows here, etc. So let's jump further into it. Before we get into like, that was a multi-branch type of a thing, and it sometimes looks a little actually intimidating where you're like, okay, yeah, all those things are super important, but where do I start? And you have to jump back and start as you would start any project and just say like discovery phase. Just like jump in and say, who needs to be involved in this? What is it we're trying to solve for? What is the architecture that we're actually dealing with? Like, what does the rest of our IT infrastructure look like? That discovery phase is really easy to skip, especially with people who, if you weren't following Tableau Blueprint, like it's a really easy phase to skip because a lot of the people involved in the decision making likely already know a lot of the answers, or at least they think they. What's great about the discovery phase is you actually get on the same page where your IT people, your analytics people, your executives, your business users should all actually be coming to this from their own perspective. And as a team, as a collaborative team, you really put together what your requirements for this project are. So this process, I mean, you could say this about pretty much any software deployment. You could say this about pretty much any even just project. You discover, you figure out what you need to know, then you govern, you make some of the decisions. You say, okay, we're going to need to do this and that to make sure that the data that we're working with is accurate. We're going to need to do this and that to make sure that people know where things are, et cetera. So that's that govern and like defining the roles, et cetera, making sure that processes are repeatable so that you're not just like creating this ad hoc mess of a server that you're dealing with. Deploy is its own step, and that is the stage that is, like I said, it's pretty easy to spin some of this stuff up. So it's a step that is easy to skip to. So I won't spend too much time on the deploy part, but that is like actually putting it all into place and checking the boxes and making sure that you are actually doing the educating users aspect of it and even the technology. Evolve, you're never done with this, sorry. But like any organizational change component, any just organization is a living, breathing organization. Your requirements change. You need to know when it is. You need to go back to the drawing board on this and look at your technology. When you need to go back to the drawing board, look at your end users and what their capabilities are as data decision makers, and also your analysts as well. So making sure that you have a process in place at the end after deployment to say, when is it that we need more resources, time, et cetera. So that's the process. The assessment kind of walks you through all of this. The assessment is very much about the discover, but then it helps you lay out like, okay, what are the decisions that we have to? Cool. So like, then you get to the really exciting part, at least I think so, which is your analytics strategy. That's like when you're going from that assessment. So let's say you've gathered requirements from everybody involved. You're looking at your analytics strategy, and you then need to start making some of these decisions. You need to make sure that it is aligned with your strategic goals as an organization. That's another thing it's just really hard sometimes. No matter how good and how communicative your organization is, this can be a really difficult process because everybody has different priorities, everybody has different goals, and everybody has their own challenges that they're bringing to the table. So as a collaborative team, making sure that you have people in there from all the different stakeholders in this project, make sure that you clearly define, okay, we're going to take on Tableau. Or this isn't just for people taking on Tableau from the beginning. This is also for people who maybe you did what I said not to do and just like went. Started making dashboards and started making folders and started making just educating some users and then have people come to you. It's a really nice way to just reset and say, okay, how does this align to our business goals? What decisions as a company are we really tied to making, and making sure that this is supporting your actual company mission and your actual company key goals, making sure that you understand how you're going to measure your success or your lack thereof for that matter. Let's not pretend that every project is super incredibly successful. How are you going to measure success? Of course, as analysts, I think everybody in the room, I'm preaching to the choir here, but this one isn't just about identifying them. It's again about agreeing and putting it on paper and saying, yes, this is how we want to be measured. Just because you can measure it, don't have to tell this room this, I know, but just because you can measure it doesn't mean it's the right metric of success. short story. A lot of times it's really tempting. I've had people really want to use, and sometimes this is the right way to do it, but really want to use how often people are logging into dashboards as the metric of success, when in reality, knowing that they have the dashboard accessible to them in the moment that they need to make a decision, and that the data will be up to date in that moment, is oftentimes a much more useful measure of success. That's harder to measure, for sure. You gotta actually go talk to people and make sure that they're feeling good about it. But when I say measurement and metrics of success, we're not just talking about the data that you can pull out of your Postgres database about your Tableau server, et cetera. So certainly that can be a component, and maybe you have overarching measures and then measures for each individual dashboard, et cetera. And then what challenges you expect. This is a really easy, not easy thing to do, but when you all come together and you have fears, it can be really just clarifying to put them on paper and everybody just state, look, I'm really worried that our internet infrastructure, like maybe your Wi-Fi is slow at your office. I'm really worried that our users aren't going to know what to do with these dashboards. What are the challenges that you expect to face? That's going to really help you understand your timeline and how much can really be accomplished in a reasonable fashion. And then also it's like things to watch out for. And when you have those challenges identified, you can look out for certain phrases, watch out words like key actions of like people asking questions that you were hoping they would not have to ask. Can be a really great way to check in on some of those fears that you had initially. And just because you have those fears, and just because those fears came to reality, does not mean you had a bad strategy. So you really, I really encourage you to embrace writing down all of your fears. It sounds really maybe squishy to some of you, but it can be really important because by writing it down, it actually becomes really tangible. And then once it does happen, it's a way to move forward. And if you don't address it, if you don't run toward that problem, you're not going to actually become better. All right. So ways to get there, those are some key things to do. The Tableau Blueprint framework, that Excel document with the assessment does help walk you through some of these decisions to make, including like who should be on your team. That is a steering committee, or call it whatever you want, but your Tableau deployment, Tiger team, whatever you want to call it, team blueprint, I don't know. But first, just gather the use cases, identify like what is the ideal process, data flow that you want, and then what is your timeline and how are you prioritizing that roadmap? Okay, next, you also need executive advocacy, project teams. There are so many roles and responsibilities involved, and no one person can do it all. It can be in even in really small environments. I've seen clients really try to take on like, oh yeah, I'm the Tableau person. I will admit to having been the Tableau person in an organization, and it's just not sustainable. If you're the only one that is responsible for everything, it's not going to be fun, and that takes away the excitement of some of these things that you're wanting to do. It also can be like the right person to be building and engaging users and even connecting with executives and with your customers about the data can be a very different person than someone who needs to be monitoring for security, or someone who's monitoring for even your site admin and setting up that kind of a structure. The more you can have that be the person who's also managing the rest of your organizational structures, the better. So even though they might say, I don't do Tableau, some of these people's jobs, if they're managing Active Directory, they're going to need to know, and you're using Active Directory along with your Tableau server, eventually those people are going to have to know kind of a little bit about this world, just like the Tableau administrators have to know about that other world. So about overlap. You need, just from an executive standpoint, you need to make sure that they have that vision, that they can say the vision. They didn't have to have come up with the vision. That can be you. That's fine. But it can also be, it's your whole team coming up with that vision, but everybody needs to be on the same page selling what the vision is and why you're doing it. This is important for any organizational change at all. Just that clarity, reasons why. And remember, you have that analytic strategy that we talked about in the last slide. Call it back to that. Make sure that you're tying that strategy, that Tableau strategy, if you will, or your BI strategy, tying it to that business strategy and your business needs, and reminding people, even if you think you've told them 5 times, tell them 6 or 7. Try an 8th. Maybe that'll be the time, but just reminding people that the reason we're doing this is not because we like to make your life hard or that we wanted to take away the old reports. The reason we're doing this is we need to be more efficient. We need to be more driven by actual data decisions, et cetera. Your executive should also be setting an example. So it's always great to start with a project that they're really excited about. All right, the Tableau blueprint walks you through, this is only just a small smattering of all the roles that they go through. And there are even, without even taking the assessment, if you go to the Tableau help page on Tableau blueprint, they list out a whole bunch of really helpful, like all these data stewards, content author, Tableau site admin, all these kinds of things. They list out what they are. They list out exactly what it is they see that role doing. A person can play multiple roles. Some roles can be played by multiple people. So making sure that you're setting up and letting people know, look, you're my line of business sponsor. You are in charge of how you and all of your employees think about how we're deploying this. It doesn't mean we're doing it only for you. We have other line of business sponsors as well, but having that key stakeholder and making them be accountable to it. Again, it's really an organizational change type of a principle, is giving someone that responsibility to make sure that they're bringing any feedback from the rest of their business users into the process, and that there is a place for them at the table as one of the key stakeholders. All right, and then Tableau Blueprint lays out these 3 core capabilities. They also call them workflows. So each one of these channels is basically something that they advise. And if you look at that, it kind of helps make a well-rounded organization. So it's not just about, hey, we purchased Tableau and do we need Tableau Server or Tableau Online? It's actually about, like, where do we host it? And even Tableau Online needs, needs maintenance in terms of, like, making sure that the sizing of your Tableau Online is correct. There's some really technical stuff, that you still have to manage even if you're in a hosted environment. So that agility, that proficiency, and that community. And you'll notice that in this framework, all 3 of these are really about both people and technology, just within each of those 3. I'm going to dive into each one of those 3. So within agility, they say it's about deployment, it's about monitoring, and it's about maintenance. And keep in mind, it was a flow. So it's sort of these stages of maturity. And I wouldn't get too hung up on, like, where are we in this level of maturity stages, but think of it as, like, okay, yes, we have to deploy. So yes, that's kind of the need, the absolute critical have to do stuff. And Tableau has a lot of resources on deployment and the pros and the cons of, whether you should do this type of version or that type of service in terms of, like, server or online, which products you need. Like, don't skip that. Don't skip over that. Which user roles you need, like how many creators versus how many explorers or end users, et cetera. Obviously, there's some different pricing for each one of those. So making sure that it's all hunky-dory with your internet, making sure that you can actually access this site, making sure your data can access your server. Just some really important, critical stuff there. But then you get into monitoring, you're monitoring for resources, you're monitoring job statuses, making sure data is refreshed. What's the process? Who owns that data refresh? And who gets the alert when it doesn't refresh, and making sure that you have a plan for what to do. What happens if that person is on vacation. Can it wait? Maybe that's fine for your organization or your team or where you're at. But even within monitoring, then you could level up and you can say the person who published it is responsible, or you can move to more of a model where you say, okay, these people are responsible for the data refreshes. These people are responsible for the actual Tableau front end. And then you move into more of a maintenance mode where if you're not, up leveling your monitoring, you're just making sure that like everything keeps running smoothly from a performance standpoint, load testing, capacity planning, watching those upgrade cycles, deciding when to upgrade, etc. On the proficiency front, this one does have more to do with people, but it's still definitely like people and technology combined type of a track where, you need to have learning plans. You need to make sure that people are understanding their technical aspects of building out Tableau, building, let's say, like multi-parameter buttons, things like that, like people building out, like, can the dashboard do this, but also the visual design, and even like user testing and having a process for that and making sure people know how to gather requirements, build the dashboard, and then send it out to users. From a measurement perspective, making sure you actually know like what's being used by who, and you can use some of those numbers to help support changes or help kind of justify your cause. Like, while not all of the measurements are about the server, some of those server usages can, like, how many people used the server this month, how many people are logging in, not necessarily how often, can often be a really good metric to also get some wind behind your back. After you have a few quick wins, go back to that and say, hey, look at that. We actually have some pretty solid evidence that people are using it. And we talked to them and they like it. It saved them 40 hours every month just on this report alone. And that translates to this amount of dollars to our bottom line. Going back and making sure that you're justifying the budget and making sure that it is still working for you is critical. And then this best practices, that's the end of the line. And that is sort of that, like a maintenance mode on the last branch. It's really that making sure you're staying up on best practices, making sure that as you have new hires, they're being trained in best practices for visual analytics, making sure that your processes are repeatable, that your dashboards are similar, that you have, even building out a center of excellence, an internal Tableau community, et cetera. Finally, community, making sure that when you do change things, that you are communicating it correctly, that you are communicating it loudly, and you're communicating it to all the right people, making sure that as you're kind of ramping up adoption, say you're in that early stage and ramping up adoption, you taking those use cases, taking those wins, those projects that are really successful, and celebrating it from the rooftops, and just making sure everybody knows, like, that person saved 40 hours on that report every month. And now, as a result, not only are they're not just not working, they're actually working on the stuff that they really wanted to be working on. Like, this person was an accountant and they want to be doing accounting and having meetings about where to spend our money. But they were stuck just kind of wrangling Excel before we adopted Tableau. So that can be a really great, like, early use case to say, hey, this is working, let's keep going. Maybe you need more resources. It's also just like, if some of the use cases are less successful, you can kind of get the organization to understand, okay, what can we learn from these other places where these departments are really adopting it well? Let's go talk to them. Share that excitement, celebrate your wins, have contests. I once used to do at my employer, like, prior to Data Drive, like every quarter we would just like take some sample data and just like have a day where we spent 2 hours just like make something. And everybody was at different levels and everybody was at different stages with their Tableau journey, but it was just a great way to like engage people and also like kind of level set and like help other people if they're not working on projects together internally within your departments, see kind of where other people are at. start to learn to help each other and start to learn to kind of cross pollinate. And finally, support. What do you do if something goes wrong? Who are those experts? Formalizing, like, so you don't have that like one person who's like, oh yeah, if you have a Tableau problem, you go talk to Kristoffer. Like, formalize that, have it be at a support address, build it into your IT support help desk system. That's why you're bringing in your IT leadership in all of this planning, is because that's the end result, is you're one organization. You're not just doing Tableau off to the side. Last few thoughts, and this is not about Tableau Blueprint, but we'll have a little discussion. I'll take any questions after this, but just a few more thoughts. And some of these I just couldn't help myself, and I've been like saying throughout. But you must align with your larger picture and within your organization. This is absolutely critical. Your Tableau strategy is here. You have an entire BI strategy, a data strategy, you have a company strategy, that industry exists. So like making sure that you're in alignment is the hardest thing, and making sure you stay in alignment is like the second hardest thing. So don't forget to look up and out every now and then. You're also only as strong as your weakest component. If you know all the best practices in Tableau, but when you hire people, you're not training them in those best practices or showing them how you do things. If you have the best like Tableau developers in the world, but your server is under-resourced, your end users are going to find it infuriating to use. It doesn't matter how pretty, it doesn't matter how useful, it doesn't matter how quick your data gets refreshed if your server is just under-resourced in terms of not using enough cores. So you're only as strong as the weakest link. Data leadership is a team sport. Don't try to do it all alone. And not just within your company, but I would say like coming to events like this, Tableau User Group, great way that I think we've all acknowledged. We're not alone here. We're all dealing with these things. So like make sure to reach out to your network. I love to talk about this stuff. So like chat about it with me, chat about it with like anybody else here at the user group as well. And within your organization, don't just talk to your analytics and IT people. Make sure you're developing those relationships with outside executives and business lines that even aren't using it, or people who totally disagree with your entire roadmap. Like those can be some of the most useful alliances and useful friendships that you can form, because it's based in some really solid, like that person's good at their job. It's based on some solid reasoning. So make sure you get to understand why, what's the hesitation, or talk about something that's not Tableau. Just be friends, because that can go a long way too when you do come into a disagreement. And last thought from me is just be honest in your self-assessment. I know it can be tempting sometimes, like I was talking about, facing your fears and writing down your fears. Your current state and your future state are two different things. You want to get to that future state. It can be really tempting to even like within your own company be like, yeah, we're there. Yep, we got that. We're golden. People are really using our dashboards. But being honest with yourself first, being honest with the rest of your organization next, just running toward the problem will get you further than kind of being like, yeah, everybody loves their dashboards. I'm just not going to ask them to make sure, so just be honest with yourself. Lastly, there are some really cool books out there about this if you want to dive deeper. Obviously, go check out Tableau Blueprint. It's totally free to download the assessment. You have to log in and stuff to download the assessment, but it's like totally free to use. And then these books are not free, but the library does rent them to you for $0 if you're interested. Data Fluency is really great about building data cultures and goes into a lot more detail about like actually like balancing your end user capabilities with your analyst capabilities with your infrastructure. Data Warehousing Strategy, The Informed Company. This book just launched this week, and I have not read it yet, so pending. But I know one of the guys who wrote it, he's from Minnesota, so that's pretty cool. And it looks to be, from what I can gather, it looks to be really about like data warehousing strategy, how you move from siloed data to lakes, to warehouses, to data marts, et cetera. So looks to be pretty useful. And then organizational change. This is often the gap here. So like get smart about organizational change. Who Moved My Cheese is awesome and is like this great parable and wonderful book about, but I used to do it this other way. And that's the way I know how to do it. And if you take away that 40-hour report that I used to build, I'm not sure what my job is. So I'm gonna go whole hog on not changing it because I have so much vested interest because I'm feeling challenged and I'm feeling so. You have to short circuit that type of conversation, and that book talks a lot about like explaining people everything we've already talked about, which is showing how it aligns to the business, showing how it aligns to that person's career roadmap, and getting them to work on things that they want to be working on as well. Making sure people see the other end of organizational change. And Trust Edge, not specifically an organizational change book, but a really great book on just like making sure that you're generating trust in your personal relationships, as well as your business relationships. And also written by a guy from Minnesota, David Horshager, who's really awesome. So that is Tableau Blueprint plus a few other thoughts. Discussion, questions, applause, Stacy, that is okay. I'll take it. Yeah.
One question. Why, in your opinion, is this a framework that Tableau seems to be the only company that is really putting out there for you? We're not seeing this kind of material from many.
I would say repeat the question. So why is, for those of you online, why is Tableau one of the only companies putting out a framework like this for free and whatnot? I would actually say some other companies are really starting to. I think Tableau was a little ahead of the game in this. There are also other frameworks. Like if you just read the book Data Fluency, you wouldn't get the Tableau specific stuff, but you would get a lot of the culture stuff. So I think combining a lot of these resources is going to be the answer. I want to say GCP has a new framework out that's all about adopting it. Serena, what are your thoughts on that?
The simple answer is this, the lack of this, why companies fail.
Yeah, it's in Tableau's best interest. It's in Tableau's best interest to have this because this is, you're exactly right, why companies fail in their adoption of it. And they think it's a software problem. And that's why the title of this was like Beyond the Technology. Like you want to buy a really fast car to win the race. Some friends of mine have been getting really into F1 lately, and they're like software engineer type people. So I think they like the technology of like the car upgrades and stuff, but it's not just the car. You have to have the car, you have to have a good driver, and you have to have a good pit team. Not to get too much into F1, but like you're only as good as your weakest link there. But what's great is if you have amazing at all of those things, if you're really good at all of those components, what's great is like all of them become so much better. Like a great analyst in a great culture using with great data users is like so much better than just some great analyst in a silo. So I think it just lifts all boats and is a force multiplier. But I do think there are some companies starting to come out with other frameworks. And it seems like, and this other book starting to come out with another framework. So I think we're going to shortly come up with a whole different problem, which is frameworks on frameworks on frameworks. So my advice is take it, use it, but adapt it and combine it with other things that you're seeing out there that are maybe even beyond Tableau specific. All right, we're good. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks again. One part that really resonated with me was about even if you think you're on the same page, making sure you're on the same page, because it reminded me of that thing that was going around a while back with the gold and the blue dress, and they're both like looking at it and they're very adamant about what color it is. And sometimes you can unless you specifically ask or talk about it, and this can doing something like implementing a blueprint or even like an annual review of your dashboards or something like that can be a great time to be like, you know, let's just chat about it. Even if our discussion is we absolutely love every single aspect of it, great. It'll take 5 minutes, then we can just chat about F1 for the next 45 minutes or something like that. So definitely recommend using it, and like we've said, start on it and just follow the journey, see how it goes. And there's no right or wrong answer necessarily for your company. You got to adapt it. But all right, well, that concludes our formalized